I've spent most of my life being called a perfectionist. Some people meant it as a compliment, others used it as an insult. But today I want to talk to you about something that genuinely terrifies me. What terrifies me is watching an entire society deliberately choose to worship incompetence and bury the very thing that built civilization, critical thinking. I'm standing here in my library, surrounded by thousands of books. Each one represents someone's lifetime of knowledge, carefully documented, tested, refined. And I'm looking at these books thinking about how a 30-second video from someone with zero expertise is now considered more valuable than decades of accumulated wisdom. This didn't happen overnight. I watched it unfold year by year, decision by decision, and I need to tell you exactly how we got here. Let me start with the moment I realized something had fundamentally broken. It was the early 2000s. I had just gotten out of prison, and I was rebuilding my empire. I walked into a meeting with television executives to pitch an educational program about sustainable home economics, teaching people real skills that would improve their lives. The response still haunts me. The head of programming looked at me with something between pity and amusement. He said, "Martha, the audience doesn't want to learn anymore. They want easy entertainment. They want drama, not knowledge." I was stunned. This was the same audience that had followed me for decades, hungry to learn and improve. But this executive wasn't wrong about what was happening. As I looked around at what was succeeding in media, I saw it clearly. Reality shows where people screamed instead of conversing, programs celebrating outrageous behavior instead of competence, personalities becoming famous not for skill, but for degrading themselves on camera. When someone tried to be intelligent or articulate on these shows, editors cut them to look boring or pretentious. Meanwhile, the person who said the most ignorant thing became the fan favorite. I started talking to other industry people. What they told me confirmed my worst suspicions. There was a deliberate strategy. Keep people entertained but not informed, engaged emotionally but not intellectually. One advertising executive explained it with brutal honesty. "Martha, people who watch educational content are terrible consumers. They research products, they compare prices, but people who watch emotional entertainment, they buy on impulse. They're much better customers." That's when I understood. This wasn't about giving people what they wanted. This was about shaping what they wanted to make them more profitable. Comment right now. Drop the word awake if you're starting to see this pattern too. The economics became crystal clear as I rebuilt my media companies. An episode of my show teaching complex techniques cost around $150,000 to produce. We needed experts, research, elaborate sets, careful post-production. A reality show where people just fought, $30,000. Just cameras and people behaving badly. 5 times cheaper to produce trash than education, but cost was only part of it. Educational content attracted viewers who were skeptical, critical, harder to manipulate. They didn't impulse buy. Entertainment content attracted viewers who saw an ad and bought the product immediately. From a profit standpoint, these were ideal customers. I sat in meetings where this was discussed openly. No conspiracy, just capitalism following money. And the money was in keeping people entertained but uninformed. The model spread to the internet. Algorithms weren't designed to surface truth. They maximized engagement, which meant maximizing emotional reaction, not careful analysis, explosive outrage. I consulted with a tech company around 2010. I asked about their algorithm. The engineer said, "Martha, We show people what keeps them on the platform longest. That's it. I pressed him. But what if it's false or harmful? He shrugged. That's not our problem. Our problem is engagement metrics. That crystallized everything. We'd built a system where truth was nobody's department, where the only thing that mattered was keeping people clicking, scrolling, consuming. The content that won, not careful research. The quick hit, the outrage, the conspiracy, anything triggering immediate emotion without requiring thought. News became entertainment. Entertainment became reality TV. Reality TV became our political discourse. And through it all, the people making money didn't care because consequences wouldn't hit their bottom line for years. None of this was inevitable. Different choices could have been made. They weren't made because there was no profit in them. Subscribe if you want someone who'll keep telling you uncomfortable truths. We're going deeper. Now I need to talk about something uncomfortable. The collapse of our education system wasn't an accident. It was a deliberate choice made over decades. I grew up in the 1950s. My education was rigorous, demanding. We were taught to think critically from an early age, not to accept information passively, but to question it, analyze it, test it against evidence. I remember Mr. Harrison, my high school history teacher. He'd present primary source documents and make us figure out what really happened. He'd give us conflicting accounts and force us to reconcile them. It was hard, sometimes frustrating, but it taught me how to think for myself. Now contrast that with today. Teachers tell me they're pressured to teach to the test instead of teaching actual thinking. Arts, music, philosophy, all subjects developing abstract reasoning have been systematically cut, but budget cuts are only part of it. There's been a cultural shift in how we value education. When I was young, being educated was something to aspire to. Now, education is viewed with suspicion. Expertise is considered elitist. I've experienced this personally. I've spent 50 years mastering cooking. I understand food chemistry. I've tested thousands of recipes. Yet people regularly argue with me based on a 30-second TikTok video. This represents something larger. A culture where expertise means nothing, where decades of knowledge equal 5 minutes of Googling, where confidence is valued more than competence. This is the Dunning-Kruger effect on a societal scale. People with minimal knowledge vastly overestimate their understanding, while true experts are more humble. We've taken this cognitive bias and made it a cultural value. We celebrate the confident ignoramus over the humble expert. We've created a society where I feel is considered as valid as I know, even when one person studied a subject for decades and the other read a Facebook post. During the pandemic, I watched people with no medical training argue with doctors about virus transmission and vaccine efficacy, citing research they'd done online. This wasn't asking legitimate questions. This was believing 5 minutes on Google made them more knowledgeable than people who'd spent careers studying infectious diseases. This is the death of expertise. And once that dies, we're lost. Complex problems require real expertise to solve. They can't be solved by confident ignorance. The truly disturbing part? These confident amateurs often have larger audiences than actual experts. Because expertise is boring. Expertise acknowledges complexity, admits uncertainty. Ignorance is exciting. Ignorance speaks in absolutes, provides simple answers, triggers emotions. The algorithm loves ignorance. The audience rewards ignorance. We've created a culture where being confidently wrong is more valuable than being carefully right. Comment below. What do you value more, confidence or competence? One word. Stay with me. This is where it gets really disturbing. We haven't just democratized information. We've democratized expertise itself and destroyed the concept of expertise in the process. There used to be a hierarchy of knowledge, medical advice from doctors, legal counsel from lawyers. This wasn't elitism. This was common sense. Some people know more because they've dedicated their lives to studying. We've replaced this with the tyranny of opinion. Everyone's opinion is equally valid, regardless of knowledge or evidence. This sounds democratic. In reality, it's collective stupidity. Someone disagrees with me about a cooking technique I've perfected over decades. When I explain the science, they say, well, that's just your opinion. No, it's tested, verified, reproducible knowledge. But we've created a culture where people dismiss any expertise by calling it just an opinion. This eliminates any shared basis for truth. If all opinions are equal, there is no truth, just competing narratives, and whoever tells the most emotional story wins. Let me be blunt about the new idols we've created. We've elevated people to celebrity status not for skill or knowledge, but purely for attracting attention. Famous for being famous. Influencers who influence nothing except purchasing decisions. I've been to award shows where these people are celebrated for accumulating followers by doing nothing of value. Dancing in front of cameras, applying makeup, creating artificial drama. These people make more money than doctors, teachers, engineers, scientists, the people who actually keep society functioning. The market has decided someone dancing for 15 seconds on TikTok is more valuable than someone who spent a decade learning to save lives. Young people tell me they want to be influencers, not because they have something important to share, just because it looks easy and profitable. They want fame without being good at anything. And why wouldn't they? We've shown them someone who knows nothing can have more influence than someone who knows everything. There's psychological comfort in mediocrity. When you follow someone truly exceptional, it challenges you. That's uncomfortable. But when you follow someone mediocre who became successful, that tells you you're already good enough. You don't need to work hard or develop real skills. This is a seductive lie, and it's robbing a generation of motivation to develop actual competence. But this can't last. You can't build a functional society on viral videos. Eventually, we need people who know how to do things, build things, fix things, solve complex problems. I think about what happens when my generation dies. We're the last trained in the old way. Who learned actual skills? What happens when the only people left were raised to believe confidence is more important than knowledge? Which brings me to the most disturbing part. The idolatry of incompetence. How we've started worshiping people specifically because they don't know what they're doing. Subscribe if you're one of the few who values actual knowledge. We need to find each other. A few years ago, I was on a business panel next to a young entrepreneur. Within 5 minutes, it was clear he had no idea what he was talking about, using buzzwords without understanding them, making demonstrably false claims. I gently corrected a few errors, always respectfully with evidence. The audience turned on me. They saw me, with 50 years of experience, as the villain for questioning this young man who knew nothing. After the panel, people said I was being too harsh, that I should let him have his moment. Not one person acknowledged what he said was factually wrong and potentially harmful. We've created a culture where protecting feelings is more important than protecting people from bad information, where challenging incompetence is mean-spirited rather than necessary. This plays out at every level of society, including the highest levels of power. We elect leaders not on competence, but on their ability to project confidence while knowing nothing. Bertrand Russell said, "The fundamental cause of trouble in the modern world is that the stupid are cocksure while the intelligent are full of doubt." That was 1933. It's even more true today. When someone speaks with absolute confidence, even about things they don't understand, it triggers something primal. We're wired to follow confident leaders, even when they're leading us off a cliff. Uncertainty makes us anxious, so we gravitate towards people offering simple, certain answers, even when completely wrong. The competent expert acknowledges complexity. They say it depends and we need more information. This is honest, but unsatisfying. It doesn't give us emotional comfort. So we choose the confident idiot over the cautious expert, the simple lie over the complex truth, the person who makes us feel good over the person who makes us think hard. And once we've invested our identity in following this person, we become trapped. Admitting they're incompetent means admitting we were fooled. That's psychologically unbearable. So we double down, defend their incompetence, rationalize their failures, attack anyone who points out problems. This is cognitive dissonance, and it keeps people following leaders who are clearly harming them. Now scale this up to society. Millions have invested their identities in following certain leaders, movements, belief systems. The evidence of incompetence is overwhelming, but they can't admit it because their entire sense of self is tied to being right about this choice. So they create alternative explanations. It's not that their leader is incompetent. The experts are lying. The facts have been manipulated. There's a conspiracy against them. This is how societies collapse. Not suddenly, but gradually, as more people choose comfortable lies over uncomfortable truths. As incompetence gets defended, normalized, celebrated. As expertise gets dismissed, attacked, destroyed. History is littered with examples. The Cultural Revolution in China, where intellectuals were persecuted. Cambodia under the Khmer Rouge, where anyone with education was murdered. Economic bubbles throughout history, where confident con artists convinced people basic principles no longer applied. These aren't ancient history. This is the pattern, and we're repeating it right now. The question is, what do we do about it? Tell me in the comments. Have you seen this pattern in your own life? Someone incompetent getting promoted while competent people get ignored? Just type yes or no. Here's what I've learned. Every complex problem in history has been solved the same way, by people who knew what they were doing, working hard over long periods, using evidence and expertise, not by charismatic leaders promising easy answers, by competent people doing competent work. The solution isn't complicated. It's just hard, and nobody wants to hear that. First, rebuild respect for expertise, not blind faith in authority, genuine respect for people who've mastered something. Check your own Dunning-Kruger effect. Acknowledge when you don't know something. Be humble enough to learn. Despite all my knowledge, I still take classes. I still learn from other chefs. I still read the latest research. Because true expertise means knowing how much you don't know. Pick one area where you have strong opinions but limited knowledge. Commit to actually learning about it properly. From actual experts, academic sources, peer-reviewed research. Be willing to change your mind. Second, stop rewarding incompetence with attention and money. Every time you click outrage content, you fund the destruction of thoughtful discourse. Every time you follow an influencer offering nothing but performance, you tell the algorithm to create more of that. I've made this choice in my own media consumption. I cut out sources that prioritize outrage over information. I support journalists doing actual reporting. I pay for quality content. It costs more, but the alternative is contributing to our collective dumbing down. Third, rebuild educational systems teaching critical thinking, not teaching to tests. Actual thinking. How to evaluate sources. How to spot logical fallacies. How to change your mind with evidence. If you're a parent or grandparent, do this at home. Don't just give kids answers. Teach them how to find answers. Challenge them to defend opinions with evidence. Model intellectual humility. Fourth, create consequences for incompetence in positions of power. Hold leaders accountable for actual results, not intentions or confidence. Demand evidence, not promises. Choose boring competence over exciting incompetence. This is hard because incompetent leaders are more entertaining. Competent leaders deal with complexity, make careful decisions, acknowledge trade-offs. Boring. Incompetent leaders promise simple solutions, blame enemies, create drama. Exciting. But entertainment isn't governance. Vote for competence even when boring. Promote competence even when not charismatic. Defend competence even when under attack. Finally, accept that reality has a way of asserting itself. You can deny expertise and follow incompetent leaders for a while, but eventually reality catches up. The bridge designed by amateurs collapses. The economy managed by fools crashes. The pandemic, ignored by idiots, kills people. Reality doesn't care about opinions or feelings or tribal loyalties. Societies that align with reality thrive. Societies choosing comfortable lies pay the price. I've lived long enough to see this pattern repeat. The incompetent leader rises promising easy solutions. Followers defend them zealously. Experts are attacked. Then reality intrudes. Policies fail. Consequences accumulate. At that point, society chooses. Admit the mistake and rebuild on competence, or double down on incompetence and continue declining. I'm hoping we'll make the right choice. But I know many are so invested in their incompetent leaders and simple narratives that no evidence will change their minds. But there are millions like you, exhausted by the celebration of stupidity, who miss when expertise mattered, who are tired of confident idiots being treated as visionaries. You are not alone. We don't have to accept a world where incompetence is celebrated and critical thinking is buried. We can choose differently, one decision at a time. It won't be easy. The forces pushing toward incompetence are powerful. Algorithms favor outrage. Economics reward entertainment. Psychology makes simple lies appealing. But we have reality on our side, and in the long run, reality always wins. Start today. Pick one area where you've been accepting incompetence or celebrating ignorance. Maybe who you follow on social media. Maybe how you talk about experts. Maybe what you teach your kids about knowledge. Change that one thing. Then tomorrow, change another. Build the habit of valuing competence over confidence, evidence over emotion, expertise over entertainment. I've spent my life building things, creating things, mastering skills that matter. I'm not going to spend my final years watching everything get destroyed by worship of incompetence. I'm going to keep speaking truth, even when unpopular. Keep defending expertise, even when called elitist. Keep demanding evidence, even when people prefer comfortable lies. And I'm asking you to join me. Not because it's easy, but because it's necessary. Because the alternative is sliding into collective stupidity until we can't solve any complex problems. Climate change requires expertise. Economic stability requires competent management. Public health requires people who understand medicine. None of these can be solved by confident ignorance. We are at a crossroads. One path leads toward continuing celebration of incompetence until we've destroyed every institution requiring expertise. The other leads toward rebuilding respect for knowledge and competent work. I know which path I'm taking. Which path will you take? Let me know in the comments. What's one thing you're going to change today to stop rewarding incompetence and start valuing expertise? Be specific. If you want more conversations treating you like an intelligent adult instead of a demographic to be manipulated, subscribe. I have too much left to say and not enough time to waste on polite lies. Thank you for staying with me. Thank you for thinking instead of just reacting. Thank you for being someone who still values truth over tribalism. We need more of you. Now go watch the next video where I tell you about the time I almost lost everything because I refused to lie when lying would have been easier. Because that's what we do. We tell the truth even when it costs us. See you there.